in the heart of the vast Ikiti Valley, where the great river sang to the moon and the sycamore trees whispered secrets to the wind, lived a young hunter named Victor. His name was known across the land for his unmatched skill with the spear and his unwavering courage. Men envied him, and women dreamed of becoming his bride. But despite the countless suitors who sought his love, Victor's heart remained untouched until the night he saw Christina. She appeared in the village square during the festival of the harvest moon, wrapped in a flowing blue cloak, her dark skin shimmering like polished onyx beneath the silver moonlight. Her eyes held the depth of untold stories, and when she moved, it was as though the night itself danced with her. No one in the village recognized her, and yet, the moment Victor laid eyes on her, he felt something he had never known before, a pull deeper than desire, stronger than fate. Ignoring the festivities, he followed her beyond the torches of the celebration, through the winding paths of the forest. She neither ran nor acknowledged him, but as they reached the edge of the river, she turned. "You should not have followed me," she whispered, her voice like the wind through reeds. Victor, breathless, could not look away. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am no one you should love," she said, stepping closer. "To love me is to forsake all you know." But Victor did not care. His heart had already decided. "I would give up everything," he swore, "if it means I can have you." She studied him for a long time before lifting her hand to his cheek. "Then you must know the truth," she murmured. And as the moonlight touched her skin, her face changed. Where once there was beauty, there was now horror. Her flesh twisted and cracked, her eyes black as the endless night, her lips curling into a sorrowful grin. The woman before him was no ordinary being. "I am Christina, the moon bride, cursed to walk alone until a man dares to love me despite my true form," she confessed. "But Victor, know this. If you choose me, you will be cursed as well. The gods will take everything from you, your family, your home, your very identity. You will become a ghost to the world, bound to the shadows, forgotten by all you love." Victor's heartbeat quickened. His village, his people, his very existence. Was he willing to sacrifice it all? He took a deep breath, staring at the woman before him. She had no reason to lie. He could turn away now and forget this night, return to his life, marry a normal woman, grow old in the warmth of his village. Or he could step forward. And so he did. With a trembling hand, Victor touched her scarred face and whispered, "I do not fear the gods. I choose you." The moment his lips met hers, the world shattered. A sudden wind roared through the valley, stronger than any storm, tearing leaves from trees and silencing the river's song. The moon, once bright, flickered and turned blood red. The whispers of the ancestors rose from the earth in a chorus of warning and grief. And as the village torches in the distance snuffed out, Victor realized that his fate had already been sealed. He had made the ultimate sacrifice. He had chosen the moon bride. When Victor opened his eyes, the world he had known was gone. The village was silent. No crackling fires, no laughter of children, no scent of roasted maize in the evening air. He stumbled forward, his head pounding, his body heavy, and then he saw it. The once thriving village of Ikiti was now nothing but shadows. The homes, the market, the towering sycamore at the village center all vanished. In their place stood a barren land of gray mist and skeletal trees, as if time itself had been devoured. Victor's breath came in short gasps. Had the gods erased everything because of him? Christina. He turned to her, his voice hoarse. What have we done? She stood in the dim moonlight, her face sorrowful. The gods did not erase the village, she whispered. They erased you from it. Victor's heart lurched. He turned, running toward where the village once stood. His home had been near the riverbank. He sprinted toward it, ignoring the shadows that curled at his feet like whispering spirits. And then, through the mist, he saw them. His people, his mother, stirring a pot outside their hut. His father, sharpening a spear. His sister, braiding her hair while laughing with friends. They were all there, but they did not see him. Victor rushed forward, his voice desperate. Mother! Father! It's me! Victor! No reaction. He ran to his sister, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. Tasha, can you hear me? She did not flinch. She did not feel him. It was as if he was a ghost. A deep, cold dread spread through him. His body was still here, his heart still beating, but to the world, he no longer existed. Behind him, Christina spoke softly, her voice filled with the weight of centuries. This is the curse I bear, Victor. To love me is to be forgotten. Victor fell to his knees, his breath shaking. He had lost everything in an instant. His village would never call his name again. No one would mourn him. No one would remember the fearless hunter who once walked among them. He turned to Christina, anger and grief twisting inside him. Why did you let me do this? He hissed. Why did you not stop me? She knelt beside him, her dark eyes glistening. Because I could not bear to walk alone anymore. For the first time, he saw it, the loneliness in her. The sorrow of a woman who had walked through lifetimes, unseen, unloved, but understanding her pain did not ease his own. Victor stood, his fists clenched. Then tell me, Moon Bride, how do we break this curse? A bitter smile touched her lips. That, she whispered, is the question I have been asking for 1,000 years. Victor felt the weight of the gods pressing down on him. He had chosen his fate, but was there truly no escape? The moon loomed above them, pale and merciless. And in the shadows, something watched. For days, perhaps weeks, Victor wandered through his village as a ghost among the living. He watched his mother prepare meals, his father hunt, his sister braid her hair. Yet no matter how much he shouted, how much he begged, they never heard him. The pain was unbearable. But the worst part was that he could not leave. The village was surrounded by an endless mist, stretching beyond the horizon. Victor tried running through it, but the further he went, the denser it became, choking him like unseen hands. Every time he collapsed, only to awaken back in the same place, standing beside Christina under the blood-red moon. He hated her for it. She was the reason he had lost everything. Yet, as much as he despised her, he could not ignore the pull he felt toward her. One night, as he sat by the river, watching the reflection of the moon ripple in the dark waters, he felt her presence behind him. "Why do you always follow me?" he muttered, not turning around. Christina walked past him and crouched at the river's edge, trailing her fingers through the water. "Because you are the first man to stay." Victor scoffed. "What do you mean?" She let out a breath, her gaze lost in the current. "There have been others before you," she admitted. "Men who claimed to love me, who swore they would bear the curse." She turned to him, her eyes filled with old sorrow. But once they realized what it meant to be forgotten by the world, they ran. Victor frowned. "Ran where?" She gave a bitter smile. "Into the mist." He shuddered. He had tried escaping into that same mist. Had he gone far enough? Would he have met their fates? "You hate me," she said, studying him. "I can feel it." Victor did not deny it. "I hate what you've done to me." Silence. Then softly she whispered, "So do I." For the first time, he looked at her not as the moon bride, not as the cursed woman who had stolen his life, but as someone who had suffered as much as he had, perhaps even more. "You didn't choose this, did you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." He had assumed she was a trickster, a being who lured men into suffering, but the sadness in her eyes told him the truth. She was a prisoner, just like him. For the first time, Victor wondered, could she be saved too? That night, as they sat by the river, neither of them spoke. But for the first time, they sat together, not as enemies, but as two souls bound by the same cruel fate. And in the distance, the mist shifted. Something was changing. The night after their conversation by the river, Victor found himself dreaming. He stood in the village again, but this time it was different. The torches burned with an unnatural blue flame, and the air was thick with whispers. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, moving like restless spirits. At the village center, an old woman sat on a three-legged stool, grinding millet between her palms. Her skin was deep as the earth, her back curved with age. Yet, when she lifted her face to him, her eyes were young and piercing, as if they saw through his very soul. "You finally asked the right question, child," she said. Victor frowned. "What question?" She continued grinding the millet, the sound filling the eerie silence. For generations men have asked, "How do I escape?" But only now does one ask, "Can she be saved?" Victor's breath caught. She knew. "Tell me," he begged, stepping closer. "Tell me how to break this curse." The old woman chuckled, a dry sound like leaves crumbling in the wind. "You cannot break a curse you do not understand." She gestured to the sky, where the moon loomed larger than ever, blood red and pulsing like a heartbeat. "The gods are cruel," she murmured. "They do not punish without reason. If you wish to save the moon bride, you must seek the truth of her curse." Victor clenched his fists. "And where do I find it?" The old woman smiled, and her form began to fade into dust. "In the place where the moon does not shine." And then he woke up. Victor sat up, breathless. Christina was already watching him. "You dreamed of the old woman?" she said quietly. His heart pounded. "You know her?" "She comes to every man who stays," Christina whispered, "but none have ever understood her riddle." Victor stared at the sky, the place where the moon does not shine. Then it struck him. "The mist," he breathed. Christina frowned. "What?" "The mist surrounding this place," he said, standing. "The moonlight never touches it." Her eyes widened. "You want to go in?" Victor turned to her, determination in his gaze. If the answer to breaking this curse is in the mist, then yes, I will go. Fear flickered across her face. No one who enters the mist ever returns. He swallowed, but his resolve did not waver. Then I'll be the first. Christina hesitated. Then, for the first time, she reached out and took his hand. Then we go together. And so, hand in hand, they stepped into the darkness. And the mist swallowed them whole. The mist was unlike anything Victor had ever known. It was alive. It moved, curling around him and Christina like 1,000 unseen hands, whispering secrets in a language older than time. He gripped her hand tighter. Don't let go. I won't, she whispered. They walked for what felt like hours, maybe days, until the mist began to thin, the air grew colder, the ground harder beneath their feet. And then, suddenly, the mist broke apart, revealing an ancient ruin. At the center stood a massive stone altar, cracked with age, yet glowing with a faint golden light. Above it, the sky was empty. No moon, no stars, just a vast, endless darkness. The place where the moon does not shine, Victor murmured. Christina shivered. I know this place. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. This is where the gods cursed me. Victor turned to her. Tell me everything. She swallowed hard, her eyes distant, lost in the past. 1,000 years ago, I was not the moon bride, she said. I was a girl, just Christina, the daughter of a healer, betrothed to a warrior. My life was simple, and I was happy. She traced her fingers over the altar's surface, her voice trembling. But one night, during the festival of the harvest moon, a god came down in the form of a man. He was beautiful, powerful, and he desired me. Victor's breath hitched. He called himself Nyoka, the Serpent God, she continued. He told me I was meant to be his bride, that I was destined to rule the night by his side. But I refused him. Her voice hardened. I told him I already loved another, that my heart was not his to take. A shadow passed over her face. Nyoka was enraged. He declared that if he could not have my love, then no man ever would. She turned to Victor, tears shining in her dark eyes. And so he cursed me to walk beneath the moon forever, untouched, unloved. Every man who dares to love me is erased from the world, doomed to share my loneliness. Victor felt his chest tighten. He had hated the gods before, but now he burned with fury. This was never your fault, he said fiercely. This was his cruelty. Christina let out a bitter laugh. What does it matter? The curse is eternal. Victor shook his head. No, there must be a way to undo it. And then, as if answering his challenge, the altar began to glow brighter. A deep rumbling voice echoed from the darkness. Would you defy the gods, mortal? Victor stood firm. Yes. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, golden-eyed, with scales glistening along his arms. Nyoka, the Serpent God. He smiled, sharp and cruel. Many have tried to break my curse. All have failed. Victor stepped between Nyoka and Christina. Then I will be the first. Nyoka chuckled. And what will you offer, mortal? Love alone is not enough. Victor's heart pounded. He knew the answer. He had known it since the moment he first touched Christina's face. I offer my life. Christina gasped, "Victor, no!" But he kept his gaze locked on the god. "Take me. Let me bear the curse alone. Erase me from the world. Just let her go." Nyoka studied him, amused. "You would suffer for her?" Victor's voice did not waver. "I would die for her." A long silence followed. Then, for the first time, Nyoka laughed, a deep, ancient sound. "So be it." The ground shook. The altar cracked open. A blinding light erupted from within, swallowing them both. And then, silence. When Victor opened his eyes, he was home. The mist was gone. The village stood before him, untouched. The moon was full and white, no longer stained with blood. And beside him, Christina stood, human and free. She blinked in disbelief, touching her face, her arms, no scars, no curse. She turned to Victor, breathless. "The curse, it's gone." Victor exhaled, his chest tight. It worked. Tears filled her eyes. "But why are you still here?" Nyoka's laughter echoed in the wind. "Because, mortal," the voice whispered, fading into the night, "true sacrifice is not in dying, but in living." Victor turned to Christina, and as he took her in his arms, he realized they had won, against the gods, against fate, against the cruelty of time. They had won, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Moon Bride was free. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please join us again for more enchanting tales on African Folktales TV.